Pleasure to talk to you about a recent interesting study that actually, the first of its kind that I have seen, links the intraocular lens power calculation outcome with ocular biomechanics, right? And this is the one study that I have found, and I have never found a study which actually links your post-operative refractive outcome with the ocular biomechanics. Now, before I go and talk about this study in brief, let me tell you that ocular biomechanics cannot be measured. What is biomechanics in that way? Biomechanics is actually describes how a biological body, in this case, any body like the cornea, react to outside forces, right? It reacts to the outside forces, like when pressure is exerted on it, right? Now, you cannot actually measure the ocular biomechanics, but you can actually today measure the corneal biomechanics, and there are machines that measures the corneal biomechanics. So before I talk about the corneal biomechanics and then talk to you about the results of this study, let me explain you what are the properties of the cornea. So the properties of the cornea are that the cornea can be elastic. What is elasticity? Elasticity is the ability of a body to regain back its shape when a force is exerted on it. So that's elasticity, right? And a healthy cornea should always regain back its shape very quickly. When a force is exerted on it to deform it, it should regain back its shape, and that it works like a spring. Now, cornea should be also stiff. And what is stiffness? Stiffness is described by how much of force is needed to deform a body, right? How much of force is needed to deform that body, that's actually stiffness. And you need some force to deform the cornea, right? So because the cornea has its own stiffness. And then you have viscosity, right? Viscosity, what is viscosity? Viscosity is the resistance of the cornea against the deformation, right? So a healthy cornea will have elasticity, stiffness, and viscosity, and you can measure this corneal biomechanics, all these parameters through corneal biomechanics. And in corneal biomechanics, for example, the Corvus ST, this is a machine from Oculus, which are also the makers of Pentacam. And they actually send an air pulse over here to deform the cornea, and they kind of measure how quickly it takes back the its form, its original shape, and how much is it indented at first, and how much time it takes to take back its original shape. And a cornea which is compromised, an ectatic cornea which is keratoconus, these corneas are much more softer, and it regains back its shape slowly and partially, right? So that's basically all, in very simple terms, what is corneal biomechanics, right? And corneal biomechanics is often also, talked about in terms of corneal hysteresis. And hysteresis means, the reduced corneal resistance. If you have a lower corneal hysteresis, it means that your cornea has a reduced resistance to outside pressure. It is increased deform. It is deformed very easily, right? That's basically corneal hysteresis means. So a lower corneal hysteresis is not a good thing. It is means that the cornea is less resilient, right? So now coming back to this study, how this study actually relates ocular biomechanics to intraocular lens power calculations is that they kind of says that a higher CBI, a higher corneal biomechanical index, that means a softer corneal biomechanics, that is a cornea which has lower corneal hysteresis, which is deformed very easily, which has lower corneal resistance, right, which is less resilient cornea. Such corneas show a myopic outcome. I mean, some such corneas, if you have a very higher CBI, such corneas will have a myopic outcome. And this study hypothesized the following two things: why such eyes might have land up in a myopic surprise. One, it is because of the decreased stiffness of the zonular fibers. So the study kind of hypothesized that patients who have lower corneal biomechanics, the cornea which is less resilient may have also decreased stiffness of the zonular fibers. Now, you cannot measure zonular fiber stiffness, but they are kind of linking it. They are kind of linking it to the corneal biomechanics. And if you have a decreased stiffness of the zonular fibers, you might have an anterior movement of the lens towards the cornea, right? You have an anterior movement. When you have an anterior movement, what do you have? You have a myopic surprise. The second thing that they hypothesize is that when you have a decreased stiffness of the capsular bag because of the laxity of the zonular fibers, because of the decrease in stiffness of the capsular bag, you have a space between the IOL and the posterior capsule. And when you have a space between the IOL and the posterior capsule, you may have fluid accumulation in that place. And this may lead to a forward movement of the IOL towards the anterior part. And this may also lead to a myopic surprise, right? This study also talks something about the capsular stria and cornea and angle kappa. Interestingly, this study also found a relationship between angle kappa and prediction error with the IOL refractive outcome. So, but we can make a separate video of that later in my subsequent videos. But for now, let us keep our attention on the corneal biomechanics with that of the IOL power lens, what relation it has on the intraocular lens power calculation. Keep following my channel, quickguide.org, for more such interesting, write-ups as well as videos, and keep following my YouTube channel for future updates. Thank you very much.